Great, thank you very much, David. So welcome everybody. So my name is Kira Dangerfield and I'm the Senior Scientific Programme Manager for the JUNIPER consortium, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. So just before we get started, I wanted to go through a bit about the plan for running today's session. So we were aiming to have a couple of questions after each of the research talks. And since we are very tight for time, I please ask that you keep those very directly related to the research talk that's been given. And any more broader questions or comments related to the topics or related to the consortium, please wait until the end of today's meeting when we're going to have a panel discussion with the speakers. And please ask questions via the Q&A button in the Zoom meeting. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Professor Matt Keeling from University of Warwick and Professor Julia Gogg from the University of Cambridge. Both Matt and Julia are the principal investigators for the consortium, and they're going to kick off today's meeting with a brief introduction to who JUNIPER are and an overview of the work we are doing. So just to clarify, we won't be taking any questions after this initial introduction talk, and we'll go straight on to the research talk. So please keep any questions from Matt and Julia about the consortium until the panel discussion at the end. So over to you, Julia and Matt.
Hi, I think I'm going first. Well, that sounds a bit echoey. Yeah, so just to start off with a huge thank you to...
For 5 different out.
I'm getting something else coming in. So I'd just like to start off with a huge thank you to I&I, who've been really, really helpful with firstly helping to set this up, but also sort of supporting JUNIPER. And also a big thank you to UKRI, who are our funders, who've made all this possible. So what is JUNIPER? You've heard the name several times already. It's the Joint University Pandemic and Epidemiological Research. So really we're a group that have been set up to try and help with COVID, but we don't see that as our sole aim. We may move forward into the future trying to think of more things that are necessary to do to make sure that the UK and the world is more prepared for pandemics. So this is our introductory first webinar. This should be one of a planned series. So we're hoping to host these on a regular basis to give the community a better idea of where we're actually moving forwards with our research. Can we have the next slide, please? So who are we? Well, we're a group of 7 universities with a number of PIs and co-Is. I'll just sort of take you through them in anti-clockwise order. So it's Cambridge, Oxford, Warwick, Lancaster, Manchester, Bristol and Exeter. And we are 7 of the groups that feed into SPI-M and some of the sort of government decision making. You'll see there's a number of individuals at each institution, and those that I've marked with a star are people who are going to be speaking today. Over to Julia.
All right, we're doing well with this tag team. We've got a few more tags across to survive, Matt. People, so you've been introduced to 7 groups, and now just to see who these people are. You've met Matt and I, and there's 14 co-investigators. And you've met Kira, who's chairing today. She's our scientific program manager. And I'm going to talk later about our scientific writers, Rachel and Marianne. But just some photos here, just to put some faces rather than just being a list of names. And I'm going to be politically incorrect and point out some things here. Firstly, while we are an age distribution, I think we're a little bit on the younger end for such a hefty consortium. And this is exciting because we're hoping to generate things going into the future here in terms of pandemic preparedness and epidemiological modelling. The other thing I'm going to point out is the gender ratio. Of the 19 names here, I think 10 are female. Okay, so this is also sadly a little unusual for a mathematical organisation, but I hope that's exciting. Now, the name that's not on this slide, but who has been instrumental in helping us getting JUNIPER off the ground, is Dr. Miller Kibble, who's the research facilitator at DAMT. Miller, I believe you're on this meeting, so I hope you enjoy today and see some of this that you've helped to set loose. Miller got us from the dreaming about it right through to applying and the start post of getting this up and running. So thank you, Miller. So more people. So those were our co-investigators and PIs. We've got also lots of members. This is currently to date the members, and these are mostly people who are funded part or wholly on JUNIPER, plus members of our group who are working very closely on JUNIPER and SPIAM related projects. We have an amazing governance board who are there to ensure the grant is set up with good governance, but also there to be friends and advisors to us, to give us input on directions we could be going in and to help us out here. And you can see they bring in lots of superb expertise and international perspectives. And collaborators. So I hope this will be apparent to you by the end of this, this morning. We're really not a closed group. We will be communicating with the wider research community, e.g. via meetings like this, other talks, seminars, and we're keen for further interactions and further discussions. We hope we can act as a hub in taking some things forward with the community. And David's already talked about the link with the INI, and just to join my voice with Matt's of huge gratitude for the Newton for being willing to come with us on this journey. And I go to next slide and tag back to Matt.
Okay, so we thought we'd have a little bit about what we've done in the past year as this pandemic has rolled forward. And this is really thinking about our contributions to SPIAM. So SPIAM, as you may know, is the sort of modelling arm of SAGE. So the top left picture is the latest set of our estimates, which we've been battling with every week. And of the 15 sets of estimates that are put forward to SPI, JUNIPER contributes 11 of these, so at least 2/3. It fluctuates on a weekly basis depending on what's happening, but generally we're at least 2/3 of the input into the R calculation. If we look at the big circle over here, this is about the number of projects, number of papers that are submitted to SPIAM, and similarly you can see that from the JUNIPER consortium we're around 2/3, and similarly for looking at other groups as well. So, you know, if we're looking at reasonable worst case scenarios, we do roughly a half. Children and schools, we're a major contributor by thinking about what happens with schools and schools reopenings, and similarly looking at sort of medium-term forecasts where again we're about half, and our R estimates fluctuate depending on how many groups are involved, but we're sort of 5 out of 7 of the different groups. Next slide. So we're certainly punching way above our weight in terms of what we do. We're also sort of connected quite widely to various things that are happening across the spectrum of sort of decision making and governmental advice. So from JUNIPER, probably our main link is into SPIAMO, which is the sort of operational arm of SPIAM, which is a subgroup of SAGE. There's also members of the panel that sit on SAGE for this emergency. There are also members that are in SPI-B, which are behavioural sciences, and also strong links into EMG, which model the environmental sections. There's also great representation on the subgroups that feed into SAGE, particularly children with schools, so what's known as SPI Kids, hospitals and social care, where we sort of share or have substantial representation. But we also sort of feed in through NerveTag, COSIM, COG-UK, and then looking at sort of large events and ONS studies as well. In fact, the only element of SAGE that we don't feed into at the moment is ethnicity. Outside the SAGE environment, we also feed strongly into JCVI, which is the group that's currently been making the decisions about vaccination. So when you hear about what the priorities are at the end of the week, that's part of our work doing decision making on that. And then we feed into other bodies such as PHE, JBC, and also COG-UK. Next slide. Oh, it's over to Julia.
Some recent outputs. We finished making these slides yesterday before loads of stuff was released on the SAGE website. So already on the SAGE repository for December 2020, you found the rapid contributions, which went to SPI-M and SAGE on the new variant, which was pulled together by JUNIPER. And that one was a frantic sort of 24 hours, actually 48 hours of pulling together emerging evidence. And part of the key thing to do is to get lots of eyes on it with lots of expertise and know which is the right data and threads to pull out. These are tiny plots. If you want to look at them at larger than postage stamp, you'll find them on the SAGE repository there. To SPI-M and SAGE in last week and the week before, put in italics, roadmap to relaxations. You've seen the outcome of where this is all leading yesterday in the UK news. I don't think I can overstate how, actually I was not part of this, Matt led it, and it's hugely impactful what's happened there. It will save lives, the modelling advice that's gone in there. Risk of vaccine safe, I'll talk about that later. School reopenings, Matt's mentioned we've been very, very much involved with. Spatial patterns we've been looking at this week, severity, medium-term predictions, nowcasting. Now, actually, some of this work, roadmap to relaxations and school reopenings, is on the SAGE repository from JUNIPER, went up yesterday. Some recent media appearances. So this is Newsnight, and there's Thomas House. That's Newsnight, that's Ellen Brooks-Pollock. I think this is Channel 4 News with Mike Tildersley. And, well, radio is not so great for screenshots, but the JUNIPER consortium have been communicating to media where it's appropriate. And science communication, I'm excited about this. I don't think I know of any other research consortium that has anything quite like this. I think this is a new way of doing things. If anyone knows differently, I'd love to hear. So we've got Marianne Freiberger and Rachel Thomas, who I think are also on this call today. They're the editors of PLUS magazine, which is part of the Millennium Maths Project. And this means that JUNIPER has in-house science writing expertise with direct interaction with us day to day and rapid and wide dissemination through PLUS magazine. So this is really short-circuited rather than waiting for us to finish a project and then we might think about some public communication about it. It's really tapping into what's going on day to day, week to week with the groups. And so it's very fast and it's very closely connected. And there's a wide audience, school students, public, media, and also I want to draw attention to these explainers. So for example, this is the government website. Every Friday, you get the new R number and the growth rates, which you can now see comes out the SPI-M group estimates. And if you look on that, in explaining the growth rate in R, further technical information on the growth rate can be found on PLUS magazine, and that links to that article there. And that's on the government website every week, just explaining what the difference between R and growth rate and the relative advantages are. And there's lots of articles up. I think there's even some new stuff since I did this screenshot. And I'll tag back to Matt.
So thank you. So we thought we'd finish with future highlights and what we think JUNIPER's going to do over the next 15 months. I think we've got continued funding for. So I think probably one of the main things that we're going to need as we sort of move through the latter stages of the pandemic is refined statistical approaches, thinking about things at the finer scale. You're going to see talks today by Chris Jewell, TJ McKinley and Daniela De Angelis. All three of these are looking at improving our understanding of sort of fine scale statistical approaches. Vaccination, unsurprisingly, is going to be a major issue. Julia's going to be talking about escape mutants, but there's also questions of long-term control. You know, how do we use vaccine optimally? And also there's the spectre of waning immunity to come in the autumn as we start thinking about what's happening over a much longer term. There's going to be continued work about the dynamics in very specific settings. So Louise Dyson's going to be talking about schools, Ian Hall's going to be talking about care homes, but we also interface with works on prisons and sort of other particular settings. And then finally, I think that one of the things that we're always going to be doing in this outbreak is reacting to upcoming challenges. We would never have thought of the Kent variant back in sort of November time, and then suddenly it hit us. and we had a mad 48 hours with Julia leading a lot of the work on that. So I think a lot of what we're doing going forwards is going to be reacting to the challenges that this pandemic throws at us. So I think we've got a really interesting set of talks coming up, which hopefully will give you a broad brush of where we are and what we're thinking of doing over the future. And just to say, I hope you all enjoy it. Please feel free to sort of contact us. And as Julia said, we're seeing this as a sort of as a hub to interact with lots of people who can all have input into these type of questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Matt. We're actually running slightly ahead of time, which is probably a good point to be at this point.